Well, typically the most critical mistakes are related to cultivation design and capital expenditures. I've seen lots of operators, they have an idea in their head or they have a budget from their construction company, and it's so far out of reality, it's insane. So the biggest issue that I see most of the time is under budgeting for capex and then misestimating or underestimating the amount of time it takes before they're cash flow positive. Those two things are a killer because, like I've said many times, the worst time to raise money, especially in this industry, is when you really need it. And this industry, it's very easy to tell yourself you're going to be printing money in the first year, and that never happens. So you've got to budget enough money. You can't. This industry is not one that you can operate on a shoestring. And however you design your facilities, especially within cultivation, you're stuck with them. I've never seen an operator in the history of cannabis shut down operations and rebuild it. So however you lay the groundwork, guess what? That's your facility. So you want to do it right the first time coming out of the gates. You're not going to, okay, rip out all the power and redo it. No, your power upgrade that you did from the beginning, it's really hard to go back and revisit that and redistribute power and your underground and all that stuff. So, but people find themselves having to cut corners, right? Because they don't have the construction budget. And the way that you solve for that is phasing. And that's something I've been through. I've been in this situation in multiple states. Pivot and move money from somewhere else and change phasing around, but be prepared to pivot and be prepared to have big time issues you didn't figure out. Typically, in most businesses, I would have a 15 to 20% contingency budget for just opportunity cost type things that come up and problems. But in this industry, I guess it more comes down to how well designed the facilities are in the beginning and whether the person that did it knows what they're talking about, because that's usually what leads to mold problems and lots of other issues with quality that are really hard to fix. It's under engineered facilities. Well, scaling operations, especially when you leave your home state, operating a small facility and a grow and manufacturing in your home state is one thing, right? It's not easy, it's hard. But one thing a lot of operators don't realize when they leave their home state is you can't carbon copy what you did at home in the next state. Whether it's the facility design, there's some basics that are kind of universal, but everything has to be designed around the local regulations and the local, Department of Ag or Department of Public Health rules, right? They vary greatly. So you can't just say, oh, I did this in Illinois and I'm going to do this in Florida. And then the other thing being the environmental controls. Anywhere in the Midwest or Northeast is indoor grow is very difficult to engineer because of the swings in humidity and temperature. So you have to way over engineer. And then the Southeast has its own problems. If you're outside of Arizona or Colorado, your environmental control issue is going to be a huge headache. Being high and dry is really advantageous in cannabis. But again, it comes down to capital, uh, underestimating how much your capex is going to be and the length of time that it's going to take to do the build out and then actually see positive cash flow from that build out through sales. It's always longer than you expect. Um, you're not going to make money in the first 2 years. I'm sorry to say it, but it just doesn't happen. Well, yeah, absolutely. We call it kind of community-centered cannabis. Is manufacturing and cannabis cultivation doesn't need to be in the city center of where of your state or the capital. So we've had a lot of success, or I've had a lot of success building huge operations in small towns. They, from a zoning standpoint, they're far easier to deal with. Less inspections, less rules. And, frankly, they want you there because of the job creation. And when the city's bending over backwards to help you out, that's a huge difference from one breathing down your neck and hoping you fail. And then on top of that, there's a special use permit. Almost every cannabis operator that's ever been needs a special use permit, right? The zoning requires it, or the zoning's not in place and you need to modify it. And those usually come with some type of revenue tax, a percentage of gross revenue, or we always negotiated a flat fee because I didn't want the city looking at my books every quarter and saying, "Oh, look at you did 10 million in sales." They don't care that we lost 2 million. They're just looking at the 10 million in sales, and where's my piece? Well, letting them look up your skirt is usually a bad idea. So we try to keep them flat fees. But yeah, small towns are far more appreciative of the impact you have on their town, and they are just far cooler to deal with. You initially have to get over like a lot of them are very conservative and they think people are going to be out picketing and there's going to be drive-bys in front of your facility. But once you get past that and realize none of that ever happens, especially out in the sticks, and that you have armed security and the place is Fort Knox. Once they realize that, and it's all it is positive for them. I mean, there's one city, Delavan in Illinois, where we literally, when we moved in, there was nothing. There was a bank and this one little tiny restaurant that was about 300 square feet. Within 3 years, the entire downtown was full of stores. The restaurant had blown out three more storefronts next door. There was another bank, a Dollar Tree, a McDonald's. All of that just because we brought in a couple hundred jobs right in the middle of that town and hired mainly locals. So yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's super fulfilling to see that. Like I said, I got capital and timeline. I'm trying to carbon copy what you've done in other states, but the outside of that, it's the being greedy and trying to pack way more biomass in your facilities than they're designed for, or the even worse than that is the whoever designed it didn't even account for that. Like how many levels of biomass or plants are you going to have, and how much airflow and humidity control. At the end of the day, these cultivation facilities, you want your plants like swaying in the breeze. Healthy plants are moving around. Well, a lot of guys, first of all, they'll under budget for their HVAC. So they got like residential air conditioning units trying to cool a room 10 times the size that it should be. And it's running 24 hours a day, just burning through motors. That's what a huge percentage of operators operate like that. And then you compound the problem by having walls of plants that just stop any airflow, because in your head, more plants, more product, more revenue, when you could actually do better with less plants at a higher quality, have less powdery mildew, sending less to extraction, and have more sellable flower. But to people that don't know that, it's counterintuitive, right? It's not. It's just like, get as much in there and let's get as much flower out of this place as possible. That backfires on a lot of people. So greed and thinking that you can fix a problem with engineering with more plants. I see that everywhere, everywhere. It's kind of typical in the industry where people from other industries, whether it's tomatoes or lettuce or whatever, come from and try to apply their technology in cannabis. And they don't really know the industry, so they're just trying to fit this square peg in a round hole. And like, oh, we do this with thyme or basil or whatever, and we got these automated machines that that fertigate them, and the lighting, it's all automated. I've never seen it work in cannabis. They're too finicky of plants. It's from an operational standpoint, the way in these machines, it's cramped and there's not enough space for canopy. It's just they're not designed from the ground up for cannabis. They're designed for something else, and they're trying to retrofit them and make them work. And maybe with seedlings, maybe like in a nursery situation, but then that's too much equipment, unnecessary equipment for what's a pretty simple process of having a lot of humidity in a room and letting them root. So it's getting too cute. You're overcomplicating it, and with lots of technology, that's going to backfire because you have a tendency then to rely on the technology and not put eyeballs on the plants, right? I don't care how sophisticated my facilities are in Illinois. Per High Times magazine, we had two 75,000 square foot facilities, and per Danny Danko, the cultivation editor, who's known worldwide, the most sophisticated facilities in the world, including Amsterdam and South Africa, and where they have grow exotic plants and whatnot. And still, we hand watered. We had automatic irrigation systems, but hand watering forced my growers to look at every plant every day, right? If you just rely on the fertigation system and let it go, everybody gets lazy. And as you look at that, oh yeah, fine, that thing's running, not knowing that hoses have been clogged for 2 days, or that one fan blew a fuse, or whatever. It's putting eyeballs on your product daily is important. Um, but it's hard, man. It's the nuance. It's the number of things you need to be an expert in this industry in order to succeed. Everything from politics and regulations and negotiating administrative rules with agencies to branding, marketing, and quality control of a product that most of my competitors or most people in this industry don't even consume themselves. So you got to understand the culture. Most don't. I really prefer to work with groups that actually consume their own products. It's really hard to get people to understand that we're not all burnouts and hippies. That people that use cannabis, I didn't just get off my mom's couch smoking a bong. I've been working since 3:30 this morning. Just because I smoke weed, the stereotype of the lazy stoner is very, very far from the truth. So getting operators to understand that, not doing like the graffiti bubble print with their branding and like all this on the nose type, you know, frankly offensive marketing that they try to gear towards, people of this ilk or whatever. It's really, they're just out of touch with reality. Fortunately, I've been smoking weed since I was a teenager, and I've been a High Times Cannabis Cup judge since 2012. So I actually know the products. I can be a great help as far as the actual quality of the product. Because that's really the only way to separate yourself in this industry is having the best stuff in your market. Otherwise, you're just fighting with everybody in the middle. You know. Now, until 280E is repealed through the rescheduling of cannabis, we have a very, very small sliver of the market to raise capital from. You're not getting federal money. You're not going to pension funds. Most family offices and VCs are kind of turned off by it, especially now after the first kind of batch of multi-state operators have fallen on their face market cap wise. So there's a hesitancy to begin with. And then if you're new to the industry, it's hard to convince capital guys to get behind somebody that's not done it before. But that's why a guy like me can be super valuable. I mean, I hate to admit it, but I've helped not a lot, more than a few companies raise money by just using my bio in their deck. I was minimally involved. I would give advice, but I knew them well, and they needed some big names for their deck. So I try not to do that unless I really know the person. I know they're not going to abuse that right. But it's a hard industry to raise money, and if you can't show a track record or experience doing it in multiple states at multiple times, um, it's really hard. And I'd say that's another nuance is it's hard enough to do this in one state when you've now gone out and you have to manage operations in other hours away and trust that you really have to trust your SOPs are being followed. And those are going to vary state to state based on the local administrative rules and testing rules and everything else. Transport rules, lab requirements, all those things. It compounds very quickly when you're trying to manage that across 3 different states. So the operational support you need is way more than what you would do normally. It's like the corporate infrastructure. I sound kind of like a jerk, but people could kind of brag to me about, I got a 20,000 square foot grow operation in Washington State. That impresses a lot of people. I got X thousand plants, and like do that with 50 to 100,000 square feet in 3 states at the same time. Then I'll be high fiving you, because that's where you're pulling hair out, and that's where you're turning gray like this. Is worrying about multiple states and what's potentially happening there at the same time separates the men from the boys, so to speak. And again, you don't learn much from your successes, right? That's one thing that's true in business. That's universally true, that you can get lucky and win, and have things work out for you, but you learn a lot from your mistakes and your pivots. And that's something I hate to admit it, but I've learned some seriously expensive lessons in my career. 7-figure lessons that can that sucked when it happened, but I'll tell you what, you learn a lot from it, and you learn how to avoid those things, and how to pivot when they do happen, and not panic, because obviously everything's just kind of one step at a time, figure out one thing at a time. I luckily have the experience that there's not many situations that are going to surprise me a ton or make me panic. There's always a workaround, or as far as with my what's the one upside here is when it happened to me, my money was at risk at that time, right? Not that but not only did I have to deal with the problem, I had to deal with the fact that it was all my money on the table. So it's easier to kind of disassociate and focus on the problem when you're not thinking, how am I going to pay my mortgage next month? So it makes me more effective strategically when it's not my money on the table. I think probably it starts with brand strategy, right? What is depends on what state you're in, right? What the market dynamics are there, what the regulations are there, what the demographics look like there. So it all starts up with I have a saying I use all the time is last things first, safety third. In that, in order to develop a game plan, you need to know what the ultimate goal is. Are we trying to be a manufacturer? Are we trying to be a flower company? Do we want to make vape pens? Do we want to do chocolates? So last things first, who are we? What are we trying to accomplish? And then safety third, in that you're going to have to take some risks and some things are not going to work out. You're going to get a couple black eyes here and there, but you have to make decisions and act on them. You can plan and strategize and try to get everything perfect for a long time, or you can start executing and see where you need to make changes. So yeah, it would start off with brand strategy. Are we as a company? And then it would move into, okay, what does the business plan look like for that? What type of operations and facilities do we need to execute on that? What's our budget for one? A lot can be saved in phasing, but you're kind of kicking the can down the road when you phase phase operations over time. There's a good chance you're never going to get to phase 3 or 4, but it's really setting realistic expectations and what to do, what you need to know to move on to the next one. What do we got to check off? What do we got to accomplish and get right before we move on to the next step? And then knowing if we're doing it in multiple states, they're all going to be different. They're all going to have their own nuances. And yeah, so I think I can save them a ton of money in potential pivots and over engineering certain things, under engineering other things. But a lot of it comes down to the functionality and operating procedures of those facilities, not being a burden on you and costing you money down the road as opposed to making you money. And a lot of that stuff is determined really early on in the process through design and whatnot. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, cannabis at its heart is a CPG business, right? Now it's a super complex thing to put that's going inside the packaging, the consumer packaged good, right? The product itself is super complicated, the regulations around it. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is branding and marketing strategy, and how do you access or how do you make people aware of who you are? But it really does come back to quality. The quality will always rise to the top. You can have a subpar marketing strategy, above par branding, and still do pretty good. As long as the perception is there and the quality is there, that makes up for a lot of things as far as the cash to execute on it. The best brands with the best product will be found out. People will talk about it. So that helps. So that if you have a really a terrible product, no amount of marketing is going to change that. You're just going to be doing a lot of sales. You'll be promoting a lot of discounts. Most of my brands in all the states I've been in have sold for 20-25% more than every other brand because we could demand it. And we weren't doing half off sales and buy one, get one free. So there was no need. Our product moved based on the quality, and it was more expensive, so our margins were better. So that's the best way to guarantee success, is to be the best in your market. But that's hard. That's really hard. So I guess the point here is the new guys that are well funded have a huge opportunity in front of them. If you can do things right from the get go, not over leverage yourself, and not make any mission critical mistakes, the chances of getting bought up or rolled up into a bigger company are far better for the guys without legacy issues that didn't go into 6 or 7 states and spend $100 million per state and still burning through money. Those guys aren't as sexy looking as the new guys that are smart operators, didn't go nuts, didn't dig a gigantic hole for themselves. Those are the guys I see that are going to be the next round of consolidation and the next round of cannabis millionaires. What I love most about this business is the marketing and branding and product development piece of it. Designing facilities is cool, and especially in the beginning when you're first doing the initial layout, that is kind of exciting. But when you're in the minutia of it and you're going through, BTUs and wiring schematics and all that, it gets a bit boring. And I really do think that that's a very important part of it. To a certain degree, perception is reality, and building a brand that gets across what you want to project is super important. And I think if you look at my track record and Google Tim McGraw cannabis or whatever, look into me, you'll see that all my brands are pretty damn cool and well respected, is more than anything. So I think that's the fun part for me, is working on that, marketing campaigns, different, you know, user experience type things like consumer, clubs and whatnot, and bonus points and merch. I love doing merch. Merch is really fun. And cannabis merch sells like hotcakes too, by the way. Uh, Cookies sold their merch company for like $140 million to the Heineken company, or the Heineken holding company. So there's a lot of different aspects, but you got to get the core stuff right. Obviously, I have that experience, but at building the brand and developing the brand is stuff that I can obviously help with and enjoy more. I used to have I used to collect them. I don't know where they're at now. They're probably boxed up somewhere since I moved, but I used to collect really bad brands where I'd buy vape pens or chocolate bars or whatever, not use them, or keep on. And one thing almost all of them had in common was just really cheesy, like bubble print, like graffiti. Like they're thinking, oh, these stoners are gonna love the, bright color, just like, yeah. Leaves everywhere, fan leaves everywhere. Do you realize you don't even smoke the fan leaves? The fan leaves go in the garbage, right? It's the flower that we smoke. I mean, but these guys don't even get that. They're just fan leaf crazy. I want fan leaf wallpaper. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's fun, and but again, the underlying product is more important than the brand itself. But you want to figure out how to get both figured out, and the facilities too. So there's just a lot, man. It's like I said, I don't want to scare people away from this industry. Hopefully, a lot of these guys are pot committed, in that they've got a lot of money sunk into this. They got their second mortgage on their house. And they don't want to hear some hard truths sometimes. And I'd much rather be blunt with people and tell them the truth than kind of just it reinforce their delusion. Well, 9 out of 10 fail to begin with, and now you're adding it to the cannabis industry. I think it's got to be 9.99 out of 10 fail. I mean, or end up going bankrupt, or somebody acquiring them, bailing them out, or whatever. But it is. I've done a lot of things, dude. Restaurant industry, mortgage industry, real estate development, goes on and on. The list goes on and on. Nothing even comes close to how difficult, complex, and nuanced cannabis is. The potential for huge, very, very expensive mistakes is unlike anywhere else. That's just a fact. So I think I can help people avoid a lot of those, and help them figure out what they don't know, and how I can help supplement that knowledge, uh, is going to save somebody a great deal of money. I actually thought about just charging based on a percentage of what mistakes I save them from. You know, you give me 2.5% of all the money I saved you, right? It'd be hard to track, but I'd be a really rich dude if I did it that way. Uh, but there's a certain number of operators that just have it. They just kind of get it. But the biggest thing that separates most people from other people is access to capital. You can be a really, really good grower in your garage, and you can grow the best weed your friends have ever seen. That translates almost 0% into actual success in the industry. Um, Especially because your ego usually gets in the way. Those guys tend to tell themselves that they know everything about weed and that they can grow the best, but they've never done it on scale. And it's a totally different world when you get into that. Uh, so yeah, it's really easy to believe your own press in this industry, right? And because you're riding that ego, especially when you're raising money, you're you're obviously pumping yourself up constantly to investors and whatever. And whether people like it or not, I tend to deliver some hard truths, and because it's better to just recognize it and deal with it than keep lying to yourself and then figure out you're $3 million short in a year and you don't know where it's going to come from. So uh, yeah, that's tough. I've been in that situation. I've been out of money. I've been in the cannabis industry and needed $5 million in less than 30 days. I've been in those situations, and they're not fun. No, and you reek of desperation. It's almost impossible to hide. Seriously, because I've had people come to me in the same spot, and they think that they're Joe Cool, right? But you can real estate investors for the most part can see right through that. Based on how many times you contact them, based on kind of your general anxiety when you meet with them. There's lots of things that give it away. But the rule of thumb: never raise money when your hair's on fire, because you're gonna the golden rule that I live by, or that you have to live by, is the man with the gold makes the rules. And you'll be put in some situations and signing some things that you wouldn't otherwise do. and you don't want to do that. So try to correct course before you get to that point.